Hello and welcome to the JackCast, the Swansea City podcast. And it is a special edition this week because, of course, we will be previewing the big match against Cardiff City, the South Wales derby, one of the highlights of the calendar every single season. I am Guto and with me to discuss this massive match, we have, as always, Steve Carroll. How are you, Steve?
I'm not too bad, thanks. How are you?
Very good. Starting to get excited now for the big match. It's Wednesday evening as we're recording this. Unfortunately, Matt is unable to join us again, which is a real shame because it would be great to have his opinions on this match and hear his.
The nerves are too big for him, aren't they?
Then yeah, exactly. He's bottled it already. The fact that Matt isn't here obviously means that we're not going to be having the quiz section of the unpopular opinion, etc. But I'm sure me and Steve will have plenty of opinions that none of you like anyway. So we'll just get on to them in a bit. But before we get on to the Cardiff match, which is the highlight of this week, which is what I know most of you really want to hear about, we've just got a few games to look back at. We'll start with the most recent one, Steve, which was the 0-0 against Bournemouth. It wasn't the most exciting of matches as the scoreline would suggest, but dare I say it, there were some real positives from that display for the Swans.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we were playing against a free scoring side, weren't we? So, you know, it was going to be a difficult game. I'd probably say that the toughest that we've had at the Liberty this season, certainly what we were expecting anyway. And you know, Bournemouth went to Barnsley and won 4-0, didn't they, at the weekend? So it was always going to be a challenging game. So I think to come away with a clean sheet, we've got to be really pleased with that, especially considering, obviously, you know, Ryan Bennett has picked up a knock, same as Mark Guay as well. So, you know, it was a tough ask for us last night to, you know, try and keep out what has been a free scoring side for Bournemouth. So I think a clean sheet there has to probably be our best clean sheet of the season, doesn't it?
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt about that, really. I mean, beforehand, like you said, the injuries at the back, the fact that we had Latibaudiere coming into the team for his first start. Obviously, we didn't know what to expect from him, but it was a difficult match for him to come into. Before we go on to anything else, I just want to say I was really impressed with him on his debut. I thought he had a really composed first start then for the Swans. Looked right at home in the back five. Dealt with everything that came his way. Possibly got lucky, Steve, with a penalty call which wasn't given, but I guess considering the rest of his display, I think he deserved to get away with that one.
Yeah, I mean, that it could have been given, couldn't it? I think if it was the other way around, we'd have been screaming for a penalty. So, you know, maybe we've got away with it. But yeah, it was a very assured performance from, you know, what is a very inexperienced player and a player who really hasn't had an opportunity yet, and obviously probably hasn't played for a long time either. So yeah, it was impressive. I mean, it's going to be, I think once everybody's back, I mean, it'll be tough for him to keep his place, but it's certainly it was an assured performance from him, and you definitely think that he's going to be one to watch for us. So I mean, that's the great thing at the moment. You do think defensively we've been very strong this season, and we've managed, obviously with a couple of players missing, we've still done well. So that definitely has got to be a positive for us. And you know, we wouldn't really swap anybody in our defence at the moment, would we? I don't think. I mean, you know, it's definitely a case there for saying that when we are the best, if not one, well, definitely one of the best in the league defensively, and long may it continue, because you know, if you're not letting in goals, you've always got a chance. And you know, I think as we've said before, going forward, we are probably a little bit short, so it's vital that we carry on being tough to score against, because that is going to be the main way that we win games. I think we're certainly not going to be a free score inside. So that's what we need to stick to what we're good at the moment. Being tough to play against and tough to break down seems to be our main strong point, I would say.
Yeah, like you said, it's doubly important just because we're not exactly looking that potent up front at the moment. I think it's fair to say Bournemouth probably the worst attacking performance that we've seen from the Swans this season. That was not for any lack of effort. There was plenty of endeavour from the attacking players, the likes of Danda, Ayew and Lowe. Both of them really put a shift in. But there wasn't a single moment in that match where I thought the Swans may grab a goal. The best we could manage was kind of speculative, long-range efforts. In fairness, Bournemouth only had, I mean, 2 clear-cut opportunities the first half and possibly one in the second half, which with Stanislas blasting it wide. So we limited their opportunities too, but the Swans just never looked like scoring, Steve. I mean, I thought Bournemouth defended very well as well. It has to be said. They really did set up to stifle us as well as create their own chances. But I mean, how concerned should we be about the way we're attacking at the moment? Because we haven't scored that many goals all season, still yet to score more than 2 in a single game. And against Bournemouth, never really troubled them at all.
No. Look, it is a concern. I think we'd be lying if we said that it isn't, wouldn't we? But I think we highlighted it really when the transfer window shut, that we'd done some reasonable business. There was cover in most positions, but we were a striker short. And, I think that it can't be denied really that is the case. I mean, we're playing with 2 players up front who are our main choice. None of them are really out-and-out strikers. I think AU probably, it does work best for him playing in a 2 up front, but then Lowe hasn't exactly been full of confidence. I don't think he's a bad player, but I don't think he's a striker, and I'm not the only person that thinks that, surely. Cullen obviously is quite raw. We've seen some positive stuff from him. He's probably not ready to be a regular in the side. I mean, a loan spell would probably be the ideal thing there, but we are a little bit short. Gyökeres hasn't really impressed, if we're being honest, has he? So
no,
yeah, it's a difficult one, isn't it? We should be a little bit concerned, but I'd probably say as well, Gibbs White has been quite a big loss because he is able to pick a pass, for example. I'm not sure the other players that we've got are quite as good as him. I think Dander had a nice little spell. He was quite quiet last night, didn't offer a great deal. Palmer's been in and out of the side, so and the other midfielders don't really offer a lot today. So we're relying then on the fullbacks to create things, and I don't think. Well, I think Connor Roberts obviously has been playing well, but Bidwell probably hasn't been as good as he was at the start of the season. So, yeah, it is I'd be lying if I said it wasn't a concern, because you're thinking if AU doesn't score, you're not really looking at anyone else and thinking there's goals there. So we need to address it, I think, in January, I would say, if there's an opportunity, because if we really are going to try and make sure we get into that top 6, then we probably do need to score more goals. But we are, considering we're not the most prolific, obviously our league position is pretty good, but it's built off a strong defence, isn't it?
Yeah, and in fairness, I mean, I think that's only the 3rd time this season that we failed to find the back of the net. I think I'm right in saying that. I mean, so we are, we're scoring roughly a goal per game, but it's it's just we're always thinking 1 goal is about the maximum that we're going to be scoring. And against Bournemouth, I mean, there wasn't anything there. I mean, we went through the strikers there. I like Lowe. I'll be honest. I think he does give quite a bit to this team. I think our build up is better when he's in the side. For example, he definitely puts in a shift and does a lot of hard work. But it's just in that final end product is not there with him at the moment. I mean, you look at his record, I think it's fair to say that he's never really been an instinctive finisher, and what we've seen from him this season suggests that it's not a strength of his, that's for certain. And that's the one area that lets him down massively, and that's why we can't, despite the fact that actually he gets into decent positions, you can't see him scoring 10, 15 goals a season, which would make such a difference to this team. I agree with you on Cullen. I really like him. I think he's got a lot of talent, but we're not in a place yet where we can make him the main focal point of an attack and really trust him to become a regular starter. And I've got to be honest, the more I see of Gyökeres, the more I'm thinking my original instinct with him was probably correct. I mean, his record didn't really excite me massively, didn't convince me that he was going to be a great acquisition, and so far he just doesn't look right. And the last few games in particular, he's looked quite uncomfortable, and just things like his first touch just haven't been there, and he's been making mistakes, poor decisions, etc. We'll get on to the Middlesbrough game in a bit, but he's not convincing me at the moment, I think it's fair to say. But the one thing I will say is I don't think it's entirely down to the strikers. I do think over the last few games since the international break, we've seen a lack of supply as well come their way. They're getting fewer chances to score than they were in the matches before the international break. And I think maybe the rest of the team needs to take a bit more responsibility for creating chances than we've seen over the last few games. But on the whole, Steve, I mean, it's a very good point in my eyes against a tough Bournemouth team, a really talented Bournemouth team with a lot of good players who were scoring 3 goals per game on average in the 6 games before they played us. So to keep a clean sheet against them, very impressive. Just before we move on to the other games, just want to touch on Matt Grimes because he divided opinion a little bit on social media after the Bournemouth game. A lot of people thought his performance was absolutely fantastic, but there were still those people there who were critical and didn't think he had a great game. Where do you stand on this, Steve?
I thought Grimes did have a good game, to be honest. I don't think he did a lot wrong. Is he the scapegoat at the moment? You do feel sometimes like there's always got to be somebody who gets a little bit of a target. I do think Grimes had a couple of games where he wasn't so inspiring. I think I look back, Bristol City away is one that sprung to mind where I didn't think he was great, for example. But no, I didn't think he had a bad game at all last night. I mean, he didn't give the ball away like he has in a lot of other games, for example. So, yeah, I didn't have a real issue with Grimes last night. I think it's a little bit harsh. I wouldn't really pick on anybody last night. I think everybody did put a shift in, as you say, really. And yeah, I think it was a difficult one because we're playing against what we feel is superior opposition now. If we were playing a weaker side in our division, then maybe that wouldn't be so acceptable. But I mean, we know we're not the best team in this league, so we had to find a way to dig out a result last night, and that's what we did really. So I think criticism of him would be quite harsh, I would say.
Very well put. I thought Grimes did a really good job in difficult circumstances. Philip Billing is a very difficult player to play against. He is big, but he's also very good on the ball. And I thought Grimes really matched up to him quite well, put in a real shift again, was highly competitive. I don't think anybody made more tackles than him in last night's match. And I thought his distribution was decent as well, considering the pressure that Bournemouth put on him. I think they possibly identified him as a bit of a weak link before the match because they were trying to, get around him in clusters, basically, to put pressure on him and stop him from getting time on the ball. But he, still kept his passing game pretty good on the whole, even if it wasn't anything flashy. And I thought Grimes had a very good game, and I couldn't really understand how people could see it otherwise, if I'm being honest. And I thought you made a good point there, Steve. I don't think anybody had a bad game last night. I think everybody played their part, even though I think some players may have been a little bit more tired than others. I think everybody can be quite proud of the way they played. Let's move on then to the 2 games which preceded Bournemouth. We'll go back to the first one, which was Borough away, our 3rd defeat of the season, I think I'm right in saying, away at the Riverside against Neil Warnock's side, which is always a painful one to lose to. But 2-1, Steve, the final score. Was that a fair reflection of events, in your opinion?
It probably was, wasn't it? We weren't great on the night. You're not going to play well every week, so I'm not going to be overly critical because it's such a hectic schedule as well that it's going to take it out to the players and stuff like that. And let's be honest, Middlesbrough's not, for us, it's a long distance, all this type of thing. I know they're easy excuses, but I do think it is difficult for us this season. So I think we have to be honest with that one and say that we didn't play well. But the one thing I was annoyed about was the second goal that we gave away, because we were a shambles, which has been rare for us this season. As I've praised us for how well we've done defensively, but for that goal, we were all over the place. Where you can't really excuse it. It's definitely the worst goal we've conceded this season, isn't it?
I just don't get what happened. I mean, Gyökeres gives the ball away in midfield quite sloppily, fine, but then suddenly I mean, our defense has just vanished into thin air. I mean, they're there 1 second, and then the next there's just this huge gaping hole there for Middlesbrough to attack into, and I yeah, it's so uncharacteristic really for us. But I just thought against Middlesbrough there were some just bad decisions made throughout the match by us, both by the players, manager, and by the referee, which tipped the balance in the end, because I don't think there was that much between the two sides on the whole, but it was just that Middlesbrough's decision making was that much better than ours, and I'm talking about, the first goal for Middlesbrough, it's a deflection, it's unlucky, nothing really much that you can say about that. But then, the Swans have a strong claim for a penalty, in my opinion, which the referee, we've discussed him before, Keith Stroud, doesn't give. So that's a poor decision by the referee, which has cost us. Half time, I'll be honest, Steve, the triple substitution, I didn't think it was a game that was screaming out for a triple substitution. And quite a few of those subs didn't work. I'm particularly thinking about the Wayne Routledge one. These days, how much can Routledge contribute when he plays an entire half?
I was thinking more like, if we're going to bring on a wide player, probably Garrick.
Well, that's the thing
he's got.
I didn't really see how Wayne Routledge was gonna impact the game. Having said that, Wayne Routledge probably should have had a goal, because when that ball got lumped forward, the Middlesbrough goalkeeper got into a mess. It fell for Gyökeres on the edge of the area. He had an easy decision to make. Routledge was there in space with a much easier route to goal than Gyökeres had, and he decided to spin and try and get the shot off himself. It was quite clearly the wrong decision. It was a selfish decision. It was a decision probably influenced by the fact that he hasn't had a goal yet. But that was a hugely costly decision, and one which had a massive bearing on the game. And again, I don't think the Gyökeres substitution worked. He came on and he had a very poor half, I thought. The worst we've seen from him. And that probably didn't help his confidence. And then, of course, you look at the goal then, which we conceded, which ended up sealing the deal for Middlesbrough. Again, just poor decision making. Don't know what the defence was trying to do, but they left just so much space at the back, taking a needless risk really, and costing us. So that's how I saw the game really. It was just a series of poor decisions by a number of figures, which ended up making the game much easier for Middlesbrough than it may have been.
Yeah, like you said, really, we contributed to our own downfall, didn't we? I think some of the subs were a bit odd. I mean, I remember thinking Casey Palmer had quite a good game, and he got subbed. I know Danda came on, and obviously it was him then that got the goal, wasn't it? But I thought he was having a good game, and he decided to hook him. That was strange. And then, I mean, as you say, I like Routledge, but Routledge is probably ideal to bring on when maybe you're 1-0 up, and we're in a position on Saturday, we're winning. There's 10, 15 minutes to go, get an experienced player on, someone that can help us see the game out kind of thing. But when you're chasing, I don't know if I'm looking at Routledge so much. That's not a criticism of him, really. It's just that obviously he's getting on a little bit now, isn't he? And, I don't think he's going to cause the opposition a huge amount of issues, is he? So, yeah, that was a bit of a strange one. It's very strange to see Cooper make 3 changes at half time as well, wasn't it? So
he clearly wasn't used to doing it.
No, I know obviously he was in a position where you can make 3 subs, and then there are still subs you can make, because obviously the rule has changed. You can make 5 subs, but yeah, it was a bit of a strange one, and it probably didn't help. And you do wonder now if he may not do that one again. But yeah, I think it was a little bit frustrating, wasn't it? And as I've already said, that second goal really that's what done us. You can't be as open as that, can you? It was the type of goal you concede really when it's late on and you're really pushing for an equaliser. It's not the type of goal you concede when you're 1 down with half an hour to go. So I think that was the one thing I would mainly take. And it's not the worst goal I've seen this season, because that Man United take that claim from that against the Turkish side, that was just another level. But it was a similar sort of idea in terms of we pushed forward too much when there was no need to at that stage. But but in all fairness, it's been a one-off. But don't you dare even think about doing that on Saturday.
Oh my God, yeah, that's definitely not the kind of thinking we need. Let's move on to the Luton game then, because a much better result than the Middlesbrough match. The performance, though, I think it's fair to say, Steve, left a lot to be desired, and dare I say it, the Swans got a little bit lucky, perhaps. I don't know, is that fair?
Yeah, I think it probably is. Obviously, it was a nice move for the goal in the first couple of minutes, a little bit of a deflection, so maybe that's a bit of luck there. And we did play well. I mean, the first few minutes, but towards the end of the first half, then you've got to say Luton had the better of it, and probably did in the second half as well. So yeah, I don't know. It was like a tired performance. Is probably how I would describe it. It certainly wasn't a particularly impressive one. Don't get me wrong. I'm really pleased that we ended up winning. It's a good win, and obviously Luton did us last season, so it's nice to maybe put one over them and Nathan Jones, obviously, because he's done us a couple of times, and obviously as a Neath boy, for some reason has decided to support a team that's further away than the one that was on his doorstep. So I'm not a big fan of him. So yeah, I think what you said is accurate. To be honest, we weren't great, were we? We've got to be honest about that. But I suppose if you can win and not play well, it is a good sign as well. So certainly pleased with the result, but the performance wasn't the best.
No, we rode out luck at times. I mean, Luton had a glorious opportunity in the first half where the ball was played in, and it wasn't far off being an own goal, I think. But then it fell to one of their players. I can't remember who it was, about 6 yards out, and he blasted it over the bar.
Yeah, that was a good chance, wasn't it? I mean, it's a sitter.
It's 1-1 right there, that you're expecting that ball to hit the back of the net, and we got away with it. And in the second half as well, they created chances, even, dare I say it, when they were down to 10 men. The red card came, Stephen. I'll ask you your opinion now on the red card. But even after that red card, when you think, okay, this should just settle things down, this should help us see the game out, it still felt like hard work. It still felt like it was 11 versus 11, and Luton still kept pushing and kept playing football. And in fairness to them, they deserve a heck of a lot of credit for the way they played.
Yeah, I think the same as you, really. The red card, I think it was harsh. I think the view on the internet seemed to be more thought it was harsh than thought it was the correct decision. I mean, there's no intent there, is it? I mean, he's attempted an overhead kick, and just so happens that there was someone there. I think it's unfortunate. I really don't think that was a red. I think if we were on the wrong end of that, we would not be very happy at all. So, yeah. We got away with that one. But like you say, I mean, once that red card happens, you're thinking, well, surely now we've got that man advantage. We've got the goal. This should hopefully spell the end of the game, more or less. But again, it didn't really happen, did it? I mean, it was a concerning game, like even towards the end, until AU obviously comes up with a bit of a wonder strike, really, to put the game to bed. But I mean, it just wasn't convincing. It was nervy. I was watching it and I was thinking to myself, I can't wait for the ref to blow up here, because you just didn't feel especially confident that we were going to see it out. So it was a joy, really, when AU did put the game to bed. It was certainly not a game we'll probably look back on too fondly, but we got the job done in the end, even if we were a little bit fortunate, to say the least, weren't we?
Grinding it out, I think, is what they call that kind of win, grinding it out. And I guess it's not a bad thing to be able to win when you're not at your best, but ideally we wouldn't do that. Well, we wouldn't do it that often then. My perspective on the goal, by the way, I think by the letter of the law, you can say it's a yellow card, because it's a high boot and it did make contact with the face. It is, reckless, I suppose. But how often do you actually see a yellow card given for that? Very, very rarely, So it's just when you look at the precedent and what usually gets given, usually that's just a free kick, and everybody goes back to their own half. And we get on with the game. But I was genuinely shocked when he produced that second yellow, because I wasn't expecting it at all. And he was just unlucky. I think they had that referee on the day who was picky about it and felt it warranted a yellow card. But there we go. It didn't really help us that much in the end, I think it's fair to say, because Luton was still pretty good without him. But perhaps it made the difference in just prevented Luton from getting something out of that match. But I'm with you, Steve. It wasn't the best of performances, and it actually made me a little bit concerned going into the Bournemouth game. But the Bournemouth game turned out better than I expected in particular, and it raised my spirits a bit ahead of the really big one, which comes up on Saturday, because you never ever want to go into this match on a bad run of form. You really don't. You want to be building up towards it. And I think it's fair to say, Steve, that this year, I think both clubs have reasons to be slightly optimistic going into the first derby of the season. Would you agree with me on that?
Yeah, you're probably right. I mean, Cardiff, unfortunately, seem to have hit form, don't they? With 4 wins in a row. Before that, I think we were. It entered my head that I think going to sack Neil Harris before we play them, which I didn't really want to happen. But now that they've won 4 in a row, I'm not exactly chuffed at that either. So yeah, they're probably playing us at a good time. I mean, if we could have got this game out of the way about a month ago, that probably would have been better for us with hindsight. But we're not on bad form ourselves. We're not playing as well as we were, I don't think. But if I'm honest, I think they are the favourites because of their run of form, and also because potentially we're going to be missing 2 of our 3 first choice centre halves. So I think, and they're at home, does that make a massive difference these days? I don't know, but I do think they are the favourites. And if I was us, I would be ploughing that message through the media straight away, putting all the pressure on them, because they love to talk themselves up anyway. So I always think you can have a little bit of joy with the media in a derby week. Just talk up crap, say about how they're this massive team and how we can't compete with them. Anything like that. Just throw a few comments out there and see what happens. It always does us some good, I think, just to say about how they are the favourites and put the pressure on them, really. But it's not, like you say, it's not necessarily that I'm feeling that negative about our chances, but I probably wouldn't have picked to play them now. That's how I would describe it.
Yeah, I'd agree with you there. I mean, for most of the season, they've looked pretty mediocre, really. They've spent an awful lot of time trailing in matches this season, which has really held them back. They always seem to be chasing matches up until very, very recently. But something clicked in that Luton match 4 games ago when the pressure was really on Neil Harris, and there was genuine talk that he may be on his way out. I think we saw this a few times at Millwall, that when he went through good runs and bad runs, and it was really up and down his time at Millwall. And when you added the 2 up, it led to kind of consistent league position. But I mean, that Luton game, I'll be honest, I was gutted. I was absolutely gutted. When I looked at my phone, I was thinking, Luton are the type of team that could maybe do some damage here. And I looked at my phone and saw that they were 2-0 up within the first 10 minutes, went on to have 4-0, and it just seems to have lifted the mood around that club. And suddenly there's positivity around there. And looking at their recent game against Stoke, apparently they weren't that good. They got a bit lucky, perhaps. I mean, they conceded a penalty when they were losing 1-0, but Sam Vokes, who, by the way, looks in awful form at the moment, he missed it, and they got their way back into it. So, but they got an unconvincing win. But when you're on those kind of good runs, that unconvincing win, it doesn't matter that it's unconvincing. It just builds into that momentum and keeps that kind of winning spirit going. And it's the kind of team that you don't want to be playing in a derby.
Yeah, absolutely. There's always the thing, isn't there, of form going out of the window in a derby, and I think to an extent that can be true. But at the same time, you'd much rather they were not going into it on the back of 4 wins. I mean, you look at like the game with Stoke that they had last night, for example, and I think a couple of weeks back, if they'd gone 1-0 down in that game, you wouldn't really have seen them coming back to win. Certainly, I think they have, picked up points from losing positions quite a lot this season. But at the same time, you'd be thinking, well, they might get a draw out of it, but you can't see them winning. So, for them to have come back there as well, I mean, it's going to give them confidence, isn't it? And that's what probably is a little bit concerning, I would say. You know, it could just be the fact that, you know, derby games in general, you're always nervous, and well, certainly I am anyway, and I'm often thinking, oh, could this go wrong here? Because, you know, the thought of losing to them is bad. The reality is horrendous, as everybody listening will probably know. I mean, if you don't feel like that, then I question why you bother with football, really, because you know, these games are just so huge for us, aren't they? It can, especially if you're in mid-table, I would say. I mean, they can make or break a season, can't they? I mean, if you finish in the middle, but you've not done well against your rivals, you probably won't have so many good memories of it. If you do, then yeah, you've got something to look back on, haven't you? So
I
I don't
don't
know.
get people who look forward to derbies. I'll be honest. I don't understand like the thinking that people are like, yeah, looking forward to the derby. It's always a mixture. There is a little bit of kind of excitement, yeah. But the
I think
main
what
thing
I
for
always
me,
find is I quite look. I sort of dread the build-up, and then like finally when it gets you, like to the day, I'm like, oh, okay, it's here now. That's good. And I quite the build up on the day is like not too bad if you're in the pub or anything like that, or if you're up there and you're on the concourse, you're having a few drinks. I don't mind that so much,
yeah.
and I do quite enjoy when you get in the ground and you see them, and then we're all having to go with each other. The songs are going. And it's like you just get this feeling. Then, oh, I'm
Yeah.
up for this. I can't wait. And
Yeah,
then the teams come out.
once you're in there, once you're in that kind of environment, then yeah, obviously that's great. But it's just the kind of the days and weeks leading up to it that I can't be doing with it. I really can't. It's
No, I don't. But what I was also going to say is, as soon as the whistle goes, I hate pretty much every single second of it. Like it's horrible. Every time they've got the ball, you're always thinking they're literally they could lump at you and then it could lead to a goal. Like it's even if they got the ball in their own half, it's horrible.
yeah, I can't stand it. And I mean, this season's derby, Steve, it's as always seems to be the case. The two clubs are looking like they're going to be in the same end of the table. It's very rare that you get. Well, all the derbies I can remember, the Swans and Cardiff have been roughly in the same area, either battling to kind of avoid relegation or battling to win promotion. It just adds to the derby. I always think you look at some derbies and you're thinking, well, that's massively, weighted in one team's favour. Like, I don't know, Millwall versus West Ham, for example. You know that West Ham are the favourites in 90% of those matches. But with Swans Cardiff, there's just so little between the two teams every single time they meet. It's always difficult to call. And you look at the results, no team has done the league double. We know this, it's been said so many times. It just, I think, adds to the kind of the atmosphere of the derby, because whatever anybody says, we always know that when we meet, there's very little between the two teams usually.
Yeah, it's so hard to call, isn't it? The fact there's never been a double is just pretty staggering, really. I mean, we've been in the same division as them about 30 times, I think, in our history. And to think there's never been a season where one side has won both games, it is unbelievable. I mean, we've been, in my lifetime, I think we have had more wins than they have. So that's a good thing. And if you look at the league record, I believe narrowly, again, we have had more wins. It's something like 20-16. But it's still very tight, isn't it? Like you say, I mean, West Ham Millwall, for example, is one that was very heavily weighted in one favour. I mean, you look at, and certainly until Sheikh Mansour went into Man City, for example, I'm sure City's record in those derbies was pretty abysmal. I think under, during the 90s and stuff like that, certainly, I mean, they probably couldn't sniff a draw, hardly. So, yeah, although obviously Cardiff probably like to think that they're the bigger and the better side, they don't tend to get the better of us, that often, should we say? Or it's certainly not more than us. It does tend to be close. So, I mean, as you say, really, they're not games you so much look forward to. You can, I suppose, even if you're a West Ham or something, though, you feel like you're going into that game and you've got something to lose, haven't you? Because you're expected to win. So if you don't win, then the questions will be asked, won't they? Whereas I suppose if you're the lesser team, you're going into it thinking, well, if we lose, we'll just say, oh, well, you're the bigger team, you should win, and all this kind of thing. But then you regard it as, well, if you do get one over on him, well, it's absolutely glorious, isn't it? So yeah, they tend to be tight affairs, don't they? I mean, you look at before we come on air, we were talking about the glorious time we beat them 3-0. I mean, I think, though, that is the only time since about the mid-90s that there's been more than one goal in it. They're very tight affairs, aren't they?
Yeah, it's very few. They're very few and far between those kind of 3-0 or more victories. They really are. And if you look back to last season, it says it all basically. I mean, the second match in particular was was a turgid affair. If we're being honest, that's the first time I think I've been in a derby where I felt after about 60 minutes, okay, I'm fed up now. Let's just call it a day and go home, and everybody can just take a point and be kind of content with it, because it was a horrendous exhibition of football, if we're being honest, and we don't want to talk about that really. But let's go back to the first match of last season, which was a different affair, and a match which, in fairness, I mean, totally different to this one, in which both teams went into it on quite poor form on the whole. Both teams have been playing quite badly in the run-up to it. But on that day, one team turned up and the other one just didn't. And it just turned into, for me, one of my favourite derby days, Steve.
Yeah, I think the one last season, you probably have to say that's the most dominant probably performance that we've had against them. I know we did beat them 3-0, but I mean, a lot of the goals in that game did come like late on, and obviously it was fairly tight in the first half. But I mean, in this game, we did dominate. There's no two ways about it. They were awful, I thought. They were lucky it was only 1-0, because they were shocking. They just didn't turn up, really. As you say, it was certainly one of the most enjoyable derby days, I think, because obviously it's been such a long time since you played them. That always does add a little bit of extra spice to it, doesn't it? I think if we were in the same division as them for a long period of time, I'm not saying that it wouldn't be as, but it would calm down slightly, wouldn't it? It wouldn't be, maybe the anticipation probably wouldn't be what it would be when you've gone a bit of a gap. So, I think that was certainly one of the most enjoyable ones. I mean, I remember being in the railway beforehand, and the Daydream Believer was on repeat. So that was quite enjoyable. And then remember they did play it just before kick-off, and I think it was the greatest Daydream Believer in history, because I was looking around and I was saying to myself, I don't think there's anyone here who's not doing it. And I was looking down as far as like the south stand. Like, it did feel like the entire east stand was doing it, and it was proper like hairs on the back of your neck stuff. And obviously, because we were doing well, the atmosphere was brilliant. And probably the most enjoyable thing about derbies is if you win, then the rubbing it in at the end. And obviously, if it goes well on Saturday, that is the one thing I'm going to miss like hell, because those 10-15 minutes, you can't put a price on it when you're looking over at the opposition and they're furious that they've lost, and you're ecstatic, and you just basically being a complete dickhead and rubbing it in. And it's incredibly satisfying. It's very difficult to put into words. It's very petty, it's very childish, but I absolutely love it.
It's just and that brings me on to this point, because obviously this is probably the first time that it's ever happened that the two teams have met competitively with no fans there to watch. It is a derby like no other this season, because the stadium's going to be empty. How much of a difference do you think it's going to make? Because you can debate all the time about what kind of impact fans have on football matches and whether it's positive or negative, etc. But I think we can safely say that with a derby, fans add to the match. They do have the capacity to influence play. And there's no greater example of that for me than last season's first derby, where the crowd was on it. I mean, it probably helped that there was a major rugby match on that morning, and the pubs, I've never seen the pubs around the Liberty that crowded, and they were crowded from 9 a.m. on. I mean, you couldn't get into them. They were just heaving. I mean, it probably broke every health and safety regulation going, but the pubs were absolutely heaving, and everybody was right up for it. And like you said, the singing was fantastic. There was a brilliant noise, and it clearly unnerved Cardiff. I mean, Neil Etheridge, more than anybody else, was totally rattled. And you could clearly see that the atmosphere that the fans were creating was really influencing play. So, I mean, obviously Cardiff are home on the weekend. So it's them, I guess, that lose that home advantage that you would usually get from a derby crowd. How much difference is it going to make, do you think?
Well, I'm quite glad you mentioned Etheridge there, because that was what I was thinking of. I remember there were a couple of stray kicks, weren't there? I remember, because obviously Matt is next to me in the Liberty, and I think I nudged him after about 15 minutes after one of his poor kicks. I mean, we've got to him. All we've got to do now is just turn the screw, because he doesn't like it. You could tell he hated it. And arguably may have ended his Cardiff career, because it wasn't long after that. I think he was dropped, and obviously he's not there now, is he? So we definitely got him rattled.
I know it sounds horrible, but I really do love it when the Swans end somebody's career like that. I mean, thinking back to kind of Callum Chambers and Ivanovic, maybe not end their careers, but deal them a massive setback, where they have a match that's so bad that they never really recover from it. And that was what Etheridge had. He never, ever recovered from that match, where he was just clearly just bulldozed psychologically by the event.
Yeah, it was quite enjoyable, wasn't it? Especially because it was a Cardiff player, so I'm not going to disagree with you there. I mean, but the original question, what was it? How the crowd?
Yeah, I mean, the fact that there isn't going to be a crowd there this weekend, is that going to be an advantage for us? Or, I mean, we've seen in the past where with the Cardiff crowd in particular, when they are losing at home, they can turn on their players. So, I mean, there is an argument that maybe it'll play into Cardiff's hands that the crowd isn't there.
Well, the strange thing was, I mean, last season for the derby up there, they were quite quiet, weren't they? They weren't silent, but the atmosphere was nowhere near what it was like at our place. Even though obviously Neil Warnock said that it would be far better, but obviously he wasn't even there himself, was he, by then? But yeah, you do think you'll see probably a different type of game. You often wonder with the crowd, especially in a derby, like, will you see less tackles going in if the crowd wasn't as up for example? So you might see possibly a better quality game rather than a more scrappy game. That's just like more of a general observation. I could be completely wrong, because derby games are like no other, and this is as unprecedented as it gets for derby, the fact that no one's going to be there. So it is difficult to say, but I mean, crowds definitely must have an impact on them. I mean, there's been a few red cards in them. I remember Stephen McPhail, the second time he got sent off, I remember he was kicking the ball away, and I remember there was a lot of people towards the front of the halfway line at Liberty that were going berserk about what had happened. Obviously, he was already on a yellow, and
baying for blood is what they call it.
Yeah, that's right. And I think it probably didn't do McPhail any good, which obviously from our point of view is great. But you do wonder, don't you, what it will be like without fans. It is going to be, very different, like no other derby. I mean, because you would have thought that by the time that the games come down here, even Mark Drakeford will have started to allow limited numbers of fans in. So, it's likely that the return game will see a couple of thousand in there. It certainly should do anyway. So it's just another thing that, I mean, could sort of throw us off the scent in terms of what could happen, really, isn't it? I think with, it being such a strange thing. But I think my instinct does tell me you might not see as much of a scrappy game, and you probably won't see as many challenges maybe flying in. But I mean, you just don't know, do you? I mean, Cardiff might feel they have a point to prove, really, because obviously the game at our place last year was poor, and they didn't do, brilliantly in the return game then either. So, when they might want to come out and do a number on us. I mean, Neil Harris has had, he's been pretty bullish in the past about that club, so it wouldn't be at all surprising if he came out and said something now in the next couple of days. And I pray to God that him or Paul Abbandonato do, because usually when Cardiff decide to mouth off, it tends to backfire. So, Paul, if you are listening, I'm sure you're not, because you've only got eyes for one club, then please feel free to tell us about how glorious your club is, your city, etc., because we all really want to hear it. We don't usually, but this week we do.
Brilliant. Well, I mean, before we go on to discuss this week's match, I think we'll just take a walk down memory lane. I mean, we've talked a little bit about past meetings. What's your favourite Swansea Cardiff derby? For me, I think it has to be the 3-0 in the Premier League. There were so many things which contributed to that occasion. The fact, first of all, there was a 5:30 kickoff on a Saturday, which is pretty much, you know that you're never going to get that these days in a derby. That added to it, definitely. But there was real pressure on the Swans going into that match. We talk about, the build-up, etc. Cardiff were not exactly, setting the world alight, but they were in a much better place going into that match than we were. We just got rid of our manager. Gary Monk was in for his first ever match as a manager. We were in a really bad run of form, had just played really terribly against West Ham United away. And there was fear that the Cardiff were going to complete the double for the first time ever, and in the Premier League on top of that. Add to that the fact that both teams were fighting to stay in the division. The build-up was so intense, and suddenly we beat them 3-0. 3-0. It was the most conclusive victory that I can ever remember against Cardiff. It was just an unbelievable evening, and it did set the tone then for the remainder of the season for both clubs, because Cardiff went on a horrendous run of form. Couldn't stop conceding and went down, and Solskjaer obviously was sacked soon into the next season. Whereas the Swans, had a decent end to the season, and that continued for the next season under Monk after he was made permanent manager. But that one night at the Liberty, where with the eyes of the world on us and all that pressure, we really turned up and did a number on them. That for me is my personal favourite.
I think any win stands out, really, doesn't it? Because they're just special games to win, aren't they? The feeling at the end, if you've won this, you can't really compare it to many other things. I think obviously winning the playoff final was unbelievable. I think winning in Valencia was, magic. Some of the Prem wins like Arsenal, Man United, but Cardiff's Cardiff, isn't it? Like, that's the game that we want to win more than any other. I can't believe there's any Swans fan that would disagree with that, because rivalry is a huge part of football. That Prem game where we won 3-0, that was glorious. You can't deny it. We really needed a win there. And if you're going to give them a hiding, well, no one's going to ever look back on that and think that it wasn't brilliant. It's tough. My first ever Cardiff game that we won, I was actually the mascot for. It was my 11th birthday present, and it turned out to be the last one at the Vetch. So Matthew Bounds scored a last minute, more or less, winner. So that was great. But I suppose when you're a kid, it's not quite the same, because you can't go to the pub after and celebrate. So it gets forgotten now probably, but the one in the League Cup was unbelievable, because you're never going to get a 7:45 derby kickoff ever again. I bet the police were furious when that happened, and we were drawn against them, knowing that what was going to happen. And obviously, it's been 10 years since we played them at that point. So that's in there. I think if I'm going to give you my favourite, then it's going to have to be the time that we did win in Cardiff. So it's 10 years ago now. I think they were top, we were third. I was working in Cardiff at the time, and all week I'd been told about how we weren't going to win and all this type of thing, because they had Bellamy, etc. David Giles was in the paper before, and he said, if Bellamy fires, there's no way Cardiff won't win. And we'd been playing quite well. I remember we went to Crystal Palace on the Saturday before. We'd won 3-0. And I felt quietly confident that we might turn them over. But I thought, right, so don't say a word here, because it's asking for trouble. They're the experts when it comes to talking. So just let them do what they do, and then we'll see what happens at the weekend. And we went up there, obviously, and we played very well. And in the end, we finally got a deserved goal. When it went in, it was absolutely bonkers. The bodies flying everywhere. It was celebrated for so long that the game had restarted by the time, whatever it's called, the game had restarted by the time we stopped celebrating. I could see my boss in the family stand, was giving her a wave, and then she had to face me the next morning. And yeah, we ended up winning, and it was just glorious. Went out that night, half the team were out. I remember having a conversation with Alan Tate, who was especially delighted, probably happier than anybody else, as usual. And then turned up for work the next day, a bit worse for wear. And yeah, there's quite a few Cardiff fans in the office, so I did feel incredibly smug after that one, I must admit. And I think winning up there is pretty special. It doesn't happen often, and there's something special about being surrounded by them, and you can just see all of them. They're all fuming, all devastated, and yeah, you've gone to their backyard and you've turned them over. It doesn't get much better than that. So I think that's the one for me. I would love us to add another win up there this weekend. That would be glorious, even if a bit disappointing that we wouldn't be there to see it.
Do you know what? You've just reminded me there actually of one of the advantages, or possibly disadvantages, getting ahead of myself here of playing a match in a lockdown period is obviously you don't have that kind of office banter then the after the derby, because I've got a couple of Cardiff fans in work who I just wouldn't want to see after losing to them. And if the worst does happen this weekend, then obviously I won't. If we win, obviously I'm going to be absolutely gutted about it. But we'll just have to wait and see whether that turns out to be a good thing or a bad thing. Let's get on to this week's game, because we've spoken a bit about Cardiff's build-up compared to our build-up. I mean, when you compare the two teams at their best, Steve, dare I say it, I think the Swans play the better football and are the better side and have the better players overall. But when I look at Cardiff's squad, I'm thinking they've got some players in there who can just make a big difference. I'm specifically thinking of Harry Wilson and Kiefer Moore, who they've bought in the summer, who, we've seen what Harry Wilson has done for, the likes of Derby the last time he was at this level, in spurts for Wales as well. And we've definitely seen from Kiefer Moore the kind of hassle that he can give the defenders when he plays for Wales. For me, those are the two key players that we need to look out for. I know that over the last few games, the likes of Ojo and Harris have supposedly stepped up and really played their part. But for me, Wilson and Moore have a capacity to hurt teams that not many other players in that Cardiff squad have.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assumption. I mean, Harry Wilson at this level, there's not many better than him, if we're being honest. I'd have loved us to have signed him, but I think the deal was off the scale, really. I think we did the right thing. I think the fact is he could get injured on Saturday and not play again, and then it's wasted money, really. So yeah, we can't deny he would have been a great player for us. So I think it's disappointing that he went there, but it's one of those things. And as you say, I mean, when he was at Derby, I think he got 15 goals for them. I mean, that's a huge amount for someone that's not a striker. So, and obviously his set pieces and mainly his ability to score from free kicks are, we've seen it, haven't we? So he's going to be, he is a big threat. You can't deny it. And Kiefer Moore, as you say, probably the other big threat that you highlighted. If we're being honest, I'm not sure Wales would have qualified for the Euros without him, or certainly not qualified without needing a playoff. He really did make a big difference. Obviously, he is such a big guy, but I mean, he uses it so well. He's been a big player for Wales, and obviously for Cardiff, he's started to have an impact as well. So we do need to keep him quiet. I'm a little bit concerned. I know when Ben Cabango had his first call up for Wales in September, he did highlight how tricky Moore was to play against. They may have been naive comments, because Moore's heard that and probably thinking, right, when we play Swansea, I'm going to go and stand on him because I know he doesn't like playing against me. So maybe not the wisest of moves. I probably would have rathered Bennett, if he was fit, dealing with Moore, but doesn't look like that's going to happen, does it? So I think they're certainly going to be tricky for us. And obviously, I think Cardiff, they're not, probably from open play, not the best of sides, but from things like set pieces, we're going to have to be on our game, because I think that's what, that's where they're going to target us. I mean, you look at it last night, I think they scored from a set play, and obviously the likes of Morrison can be dangerous in those situations. So they're going to be, the key issues, I would have thought, and it's going to be interesting to see how he lines up. I mean, I would assume we're going to go with a 3-5-2. I mean, we need to think really about what we're going to do. I mean, what would your 11 be in an ideal world, or realistically? Because obviously we're assuming Bennett or Guay slash and probably not go into play. But I mean, how would you approach this? I mean, would you go 3 deep defensive midfielders, or would you play one of the attacking ones, or what do you think is our stronger side for this game?
I would like to see us play an attacking midfielder. I'll be honest. I don't think the formation is going to change that much. It's just a question of whether we go 3 central midfielders behind 2 strikers, or whether we stick with, say, Grimes plus one other. Then you have either Danda or Palmer ahead behind those 2 strikers. For me, I'd rather see us go for it and keep that attacking threat and play a number 10 in the side. Because even when we've got 3 central midfielders in the team, it can sometimes feel like hard work, that midfield, and it can sometimes feel like they just get under each other's feet and it gets over congested. Even though it does probably make us more solid without the ball, it doesn't really do much when we have that possession. So I mean, the back 5, if Gay's fit, he comes in for Latibaudière. If he's not, which is certainly a strong possibility, then Latibaudière keeps his place, and hopefully he can do as well against Cardiff as he did against Bournemouth. The one thing I'll say though is he is under 6 foot, and I think when you look at the height of that defence, you've got Cabango, who's about 6'2". You've got Bidwell, who's 6 foot. The rest of them are under 6 foot, which isn't an ideal scenario when you're playing against a team of giants like Cardiff are, who are just going to lump that ball long and try and put you under pressure. But I mean, the defence depends really on fitness entirely. It picks itself, really. Midfield, as well as I thought Smith did against Bournemouth, I would still play Fulton ahead of him, because I think Fulton has more strings to his bow than Smith. I think he's better in possession than Smith is, and he certainly carries a goal threat which Smith can't provide. So I would pick him to partner Grimes in midfield. And I would be tempted to pick Palmer ahead of Danda, just purely because of his physicality. Danda, I still think, is at the stage where he suits some games, doesn't suit others. And I don't think Cardiff is really a game for him. That there is an argument that his mobility would be useful against a team like Cardiff, who aren't the most mobile. But I just think Palmer has that mobility, but also has that physical presence. And while he may not have the finesse that Danda has, I think he can be more effective in this kind of match than Danda would be. So I'd pick him behind Ayew and Lowe. That would be my team. What about you, Steve?
Yeah, I'm thinking pretty much exactly the same. So obviously Woodman, Roberts. Obviously, I think in an ideal world it would be Guay, Bennett, and whatever it's called, Cabango. Whether that's going to happen or not, I don't know. You do never know. We might be pulling a bit of a fast one on this. Guay, probably the more likely to be fit, but with Bennett, we may have just ruled him out, and that's not actually the case. I'm hoping that's going to be it, but obviously Latibaudière, that's probably not exactly how you say his name, but he did well last night, so he'd be unlucky to be dropped. But at the same time, if the others are fit, with it being Cardiff, we really need our best team out there. So yeah, obviously Norton would come in as well. I think I'd probably prefer Norton to him, just because of the experience, really, if we are missing one of the first choice defenders. So obviously Bidwell, and then I'm with you, Grimes and Fulton. I think Fulton needs to play this game. I think it becomes more of a battle. I think he's the one. Definitely agree with you on Palmer over Danda. Danda, you just think he could get brushed aside in this game and become a bit of a passenger, which I don't think will be the case if Palmer plays. And like you, I don't want us to play with 3 defensive midfielders. I think if we do that, we're going to really struggle to get up the pitch, and you just don't see us offering much of a threat. So I wouldn't go down that route. And then obviously Ayew picks himself, and Lowe will play as well then. So I think that's pretty much the same team, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I will say is as well, Bidwell looked quite tired against Bournemouth, especially by the end of that match. I just wonder if there's a little question mark about him at the moment, and whether Manning maybe gets considered to come in ahead of him. I mean, he's had a very good season, Bidwell. We were raving about him at the start of the season, but the last few games, he just hasn't had that dynamism that he had before. And the way we play is so reliant on our wing backs to provide that attacking threat that if one of them is just running a little bit low on energy, it really does stifle attack. And Connor Roberts doesn't look like he's going to run out of energy anytime soon, but Bidwell maybe is feeling it a little bit by now. So I don't know. Part of me thinks maybe we'd be better off going for Manning on the left as well, just to give us fresher legs against Cardiff.
Yeah, I think that it's certainly worth considering. I probably would lean towards Bidwell, but I did say earlier I don't think he's been playing as well as he did in previous weeks. So it certainly is one to consider. So I think if we did that, I wouldn't be especially annoyed. Put it that way. I mean, if I see Dander's name on the team sheet, no disrespect to him, I will be concerned just because you do see someone like him just not having the type of impact that we need. Whereas if like Manning was changed with and came in for Bidwell, I think everyone would probably be okay with that, really, because Manning hasn't done a huge amount wrong. He hasn't had much of a chance, really, either. So, he probably deserves more of an opportunity than he's had. But obviously, Bidwell has done well to a point, so he hasn't been given much of an opportunity yet.
And you touched on it earlier, Steve. Set pieces. I mean, it's what Cardiff are known for. They are, whenever they get a corner, or a free kick in an attacking area, they're going to load the box and they're going to try and just, score from those. I mean, their record from open play this season is pretty poor. Only 8 goals scored in 17 games. But from set pieces, 11 goals scored, which is 4 more than the next highest in the championship. That tells you everything as far as I'm concerned. That is where they are most dangerous. They have got a lot of tall players, and they've now got players that can put a good delivery into them as well. I mean, that is where they're at their most dangerous. And you would think playing against a team like the Swans, who are not necessarily the tallest, that would be a vulnerability. But I've got just something to give you a bit of hope. One, the Swans have only conceded 2 goals from set pieces so far this season, which is the lowest in the league apart from Millwall. And 2, the Swans have not conceded a single headed goal this season. And when you look at the way we do defend against crosses into the box, we tend to be very, very good at this. I mean, we saw it, against Bournemouth, we saw it against Luton. When that ball comes into the box, we tend to be very good at reading that ball and getting rid of it. So I don't know if that gives you any kind of hope that we can kind of withstand that threat from Cardiff. It's still going to be a tough ask because they are the best in the division when it comes to set pieces. But I do think that we are better equipped than a lot of teams, despite our lack of height, to actually deal with the set piece threat. We are pretty good in the air, and I'm touching wood right now.
Yeah, I think there's reasons for us not to be too fearful of it, but to also know that obviously if we're going to be missing some of our first choice defenders, then that probably does give them a better opportunity from those situations. It's I think if Graham Potter was here now, as much as I like him, much as his lovely style of play was brilliant, I'd be probably writing the game off if I'm honest with you, because you would just be thinking you could see us dominating, playing this lovely football, creating chances, and then there'll be a corner and we will concede. And then you just think it'll all be for nothing. So,
do you know what? If it was Graham Potter's Swans against this Cardiff team, I think I'd probably put money on it being something like a 4-3 for Cardiff. It would be something like that. It would be mental because I think we'd have the skills to kind of open them up with their kind of very flat-footed players, but I mean at set pieces we'd be just lambs for the slaughter, wouldn't we? They would absolutely destroy us.
Yeah, it would be very, very concerning from those situations, wouldn't it? You'd be thinking every time the ball goes into the box, what the hell is going to happen here? Because we were poor on those situations. It's one of the big things that Cooper's improved, to be fair, is that it's no longer anywhere near as easy to score against us. So, there is credit deserved for that, really. we can handle these situations. That is the good thing. We have shown it over a period of time now, really. So in that sense, it is encouraging. We can go there, and we will be difficult to score against. That's the most important thing, really. But it could only take one ball, couldn't it? I mean, you look at the height of someone like Kiefer Moore, for example, as well, and it might not be as easy to stop if it's a good ball in, because obviously he is so much taller than everybody else. So he might be, if nobody can get to his height, it's going to be a problem, isn't it? So, I think the main thing would be to try and avoid those situations where possible. It's going to, obviously, there's no way you can, stop all of those situations, but we do need to try and make sure that we don't give away cheap corners, cheap free kicks, and all this type of thing. We need to, try and be a bit clever in that sense, because they're the areas where they're going to excel. And you would have thought that if there's any sort of incident, they're probably going to try and go down just to win those situations, because they know it's going to be a big advantage to them, really.
And we've spoken a lot, which probably tells you a lot about how Cardiff are going to approach this match, and how we deal with their threat. Who are the players for us who are capable of winning this game, in your opinion? I mean, one man surely stands out in all this.
Yeah, I was tempted to be sarcastic and name someone who never scores, but it's obviously going to be AU as our biggest threat, isn't he? I mean, I said earlier, I don't really back many others to chip in with goals. So if we're going to win this game, he's going to be huge for us, I would have thought, because you just fancy him to stick the ball in if he does get a good chance. So that's what we need him to. We need to give him opportunities as well, I would say. He can't do it all on his own, can he? I mean, Connor Roberts has been playing really well recently. Hopefully he can, have a big game for us and offer a lot going forward. I mean, the engine on him is unbelievable, really, isn't it? So I've got no doubts about him in that sense. He's going to be really up for it, I think, as well, because he didn't play either game last year. I think he was dropped for both. So you think like a local lad would really want to play in this game. He's going to play in it this time. He's going to be up for it, I think. So, hopefully not too up for it so he doesn't lose his head. But, I think if I could handpick what might happen, then Connor Roberts' winner would just be sensational.
You're reading my mind. I was about to ask you which one of our players would you most want to see score the winner, because there's the potential for a couple of academy products to play. I mean, you've got Robert, who is a Jack through and through, and you just know that if he scored, I mean, he wouldn't be able to control himself. He would go absolutely insane. You've got Cabango, who, of course, was born in Cardiff. I mean, if he was to score against them, that would be absolutely incredible. You've also got the prospect of Liam Cullen on the bench. Again, just a Jack through and through. I mean, what he scored on a big occasion at the end of last season. Can he get his second in another big occasion? I mean, there are quite a few nice storylines that could be written here if any of those were to get their names on the score sheet.
Yeah, there are, but I mean, if we're talking real dreams, the real dream is that Alan Tate subs himself on and scores, aren't they? But unfortunately, I don't think that's going to happen. But I mean, if we do end up getting a winner of some sort or anything like that, the camera needs to pan to Tate, doesn't it? It'd almost be a shame though that there would be no fans there, really, because you could imagine Tate would take so much more pleasure if they were.
I think the EFL's disciplinary panel will ensure that there's a camera on Tate at all times. Like, even when he's walking to the toilet, they'll have a camera on him just to make sure that he doesn't do anything wrong.
Probably the Welsh press will as well. They'll be like, let's keep an eye on him so we can stitch him up if he does anything.
Oh my God, Alan Tate. But that's the kind of personality that you want in this kind of match. You want somebody that knows exactly what it means. I always remember that match at Ninian Park, the last one at Ninian Park, infamous, of course, because of what happened at the end there. But who was the first man out the tunnel that morning? Alan Tate. I remember him coming out and just going straight to the Cardiff fans to stretch in front of them and wind them up before we even got started, and it got our crowd going. It wound the home crowd up. That's the kind of that's the kind of attitude that you want on Derby Day. That's the kind of antagonistic approach that you want on Derby Day. The kind, just somebody that understands exactly what it means to fans. And like we said earlier, we got that performance last season at the Liberty where the players came out and they gave the absolute perfect Derby Day performance, giving you everything you want, all the blood, guts, thunder, and emotion that you want from a Derby Day performance. We want that again, pretty much. We want that again. Steve, I think the time has come now for us to give a dreaded prediction. There's a lot of pressure on this one, so I'll start with you because I don't want to go first. How do you see this match going?
Oh, God. My predictions this season have not been very good. So you might have an idea how this is going to go. I'm going to predict Cardiff to win 1-0. I pray to God that I am wrong. But yeah, I'm gonna tip us to lose this one, unfortunately. Yeah, but I've been wrong a lot this season. So there was no way I was going to predict the Swans win. But as I said earlier, I do think they are the favourites. And we should be lamping that message up for the next few days. Let's try and put the pressure on them, I think.
Yeah, I'm very tempted to say Cardiff win for the same reasons because my predictions have been so bad this year. I actually predicted a 3-0 win for Bournemouth on last night. And obviously it turned out to be a 0-0. But I can't go as far as saying that Cardiff will win. So I'm gonna go for a 1-1 draw. I agree with you, Steve. I think Cardiff will be favourites because they're home, because of the run that they're on at the moment. We've not been as good over the last few weeks as we were before the international break. So you'd imagine that Cardiff will be the favourite, but I do think it's all to play for, and I still think it's going to be a very tight game, and it could come down to just which team understands the magnitude of the derby more and really brings their A game. Before we go, Steve, I mean, usually before a derby match, we'd be preparing to go to the stadium. You'd be preparing to go down to the Liberty at 5 o'clock in the morning and waiting in the dark for the buses to turn up. I'd be preparing to walk through Campden with my coat zipped up all the way to sneak into the away end. But of course, this weekend it's going to be a derby like no other. We're going to be sat at home watching it. Can't even go to the pubs to have a pint because of COVID. So have you got any kind of specific plans for this match because it's a derby?
Find Mark Drakeford and get him to answer questions. No, I'm not going to do that. No, nothing major. It's going to be horrible. And I mean, it's sort of this. What I find on Derby Day is it's obviously there's a lot of nervous tension. If you're with people who sort of feel the same way, it doesn't. I'm sort of not as nervous, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So the fact that I'm pretty much going to be watching just me and my father, that it sort of doesn't soothe the mind. Like I'm going to hate it. I can see it coming. It's going to arguably be worse than normal, I think, because it's just. Everyone's going to be feeling the same, and we've all pretty much got to watch it on our own or in very small groups. It's just, if there was ever a season to not play them, it's this one, isn't it? And we don't play them that often, but of course we're playing them this season, and it's just not very nice. I think there's a big part of me that thinks, can we just have 2 0-0s with them, just so no one misses anything? And we both just get 2 points and move on, but. There's
a bigger part of me that says I want to beat them 3-0 again. I really that's the main bit.
But if I said to you right now, there's going to be 2 0-0s, you wouldn't say no, would you?
No, because I've always said that, the main thing with a derby is that you do not lose it. It is not a must win. It is a must not lose. You do not hand them the bragging rights. Like, I can cope with a draw. I can if you were to offer me a draw right now, I would happily take it, because that means then that kind of we are not subjugated to the kind of incessant abuse that would come if we were to lose that match. Obviously, if we were to win it, that would be amazing, and we would be the ones, abusing the other side. But there's just nothing worse than losing on a derby day. It's just a horrible feeling, and it lingers. And we were talking before the match, before this pod, sorry, about whether we should discuss the next match, which is Derby, coming up on Wednesday. And we decided, no, there's no point, because the entire focus is on Saturday. Nobody's thinking about Derby. Nobody's thinking that far ahead. I had to Google to see who we were actually playing and when. And even after the match, I don't think people's minds are going to be on Derby. I think everybody's still going to be living in the moment, whether we win or lose. Either we're going to be seething or we're going to be celebrating madly. And it can be a good thing. It can be a bad thing. But the Derby is, for better or worse, all-encompassing. It just envelops every single fan from both of these clubs, and it becomes obsessive. For the days and weeks leading up to it, and it just builds to this crescendo, and it is going to be weird watching it at home, but I'm with you, Steve. I still think I'm going to be on the edge of my seat. I still think I'm going to be kicking every ball. I'll have to watch that I'm not screaming, shouting, swearing the same way that I would in a stadium, because I would upset the neighbours and my wife very much by doing that. But I mean, it's the same nerves and the same anxiety and the same excitement. It's going to be there. It's not your usual derby, but it is still a derby, and it's still going to feel like a derby, even though we're watching at home. So I think preparing for this match now, I'm already getting excited about it. Well, not excited, but I'm already getting wound up about it. I'm already thinking about it. I booked a day off work on Friday, which probably wasn't a good idea, because that's just going to be spent daydreaming about Connor Roberts scoring a last minute winner. But it's on my mind now, and it's not going anywhere until long after the final whistle on Saturday. Just something that may give us a little bit of hope. Neil Harris's derby record. He as Millwall manager, he played 19 London derbies, won just 4 of them, which is quite a bad record. And obviously he's already had 1 game as Cardiff manager in a derby, and that was a draw. So is there possibly a hint there that maybe he's not as good at kind of getting his team energized? I don't know. I mean, we can read into a lot of things going into derby, Steve, but at the end of the day, it is a bit of a one-off. Form doesn't count for as much when it comes to a derby, and strange things can happen, as we've seen in the past.
Yeah, I mean, you just don't know, do you? That's the truth of it. I mean, that's why it's always very foolish to talk about what you're going to do and all this type of thing, because you really just don't know, do you? They are more of a lottery than a normal game, and with the circumstances now, it probably adds to it even more. So it is so difficult to call. I mean, you mentioned there Millwall's record in derbies. Don't know the circumstances really. What you would say is that Millwall, not one of the bigger teams in the Championship, probably always going to maybe struggle against some of the bigger London sides. I'm trying to think of some of the ones maybe that were in there, but.
There were some matches in League One there as well, I should point out, where Millwall would have been one of the bigger sides. I
suppose if they're playing like an equivalent of a Leyton Orient maybe or something like that, you would expect them to win, wouldn't you? But it's you just don't know, do you? It's who honestly knows? But what I do know is that I've been quite calm watching the Swans on the laptop, far calmer than I would have been if I was in the stadium. But I'm not quite sure that that's going to be the case on Saturday. No. I think if the ball goes in the net, I think it's going to be, there's going to be a few neighbours wondering what's going on. Maybe not on one side, because I think they've got season tickets, so they'll probably be doing the same thing. But it's probably there'll be a lot of cheers, I think, if we do get a goal, and obviously probably a lot of swearing if the ball goes in the wrong net.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, sorry. So I don't know if we've helped ease the nerves or if we've just made you more anxious, but we hope you have enjoyed this pod in some strange sadomasochistic way. Please, if you haven't had just totally enough of us just playing on your nerves in this podcast, you may be interested in joining us when we record our next one after the Cardiff City match, where for better or worse we will be discussing what's gone on hopefully we will be discussing a last-minute Connor Roberts winner and not a gut-wrenching defeat. But either way, we will be responding to it early next week. Hope you've enjoyed this podcast. Until next time, thank you very much for listening.